let's talk about what happens after you're under contract to purchase a home. The under contract process is one of my favorite parts. Why? For one reason, because it's so important. For another reason, no two processes are exactly the same. Your under contract process is probably going to differ, and it might differ a lot from your friends or family members. So you never know exactly what to expect. You can find some unknowns as you dig into the house with your inspection and your due diligence. But the reason this is my favorite part of the process is it means you got the house. The seller has signed your offer. You made a great offer on a house you want to buy, and the seller agreed to sell it to you on terms that you like. So first, if you're at this point in the process, congratulations. It's very exciting to know which house you're planning to buy. Now you know your closing date. You know by when you have to inspect. You know how much you're paying. You know how much closing costs you have to pay. It goes from unknown to known. Now through the under contract process, it's your job to confirm. Confirm if this house is right for you. Gather as much information as you possibly can. And as long as everything's above board, you're going to close and this will become your new home. So it's very exciting. So let's look through what happens after you're under contract to buy a house. First things first, your contract needs to go to your lender. I assume you're working with a realtor. Your realtor will take care of that for you. But please make a quick call to your lender and see what else they need from you. Often after you're under contract, your lender has a few questions for you, and they may have a little bit of information for you, for example, about the appraisal. So make sure to make contact with your lender on the very first day that you're under contract and provide them anything additional that they'll need. During your contract process, the lender will probably contact you several times requesting items from you. Common requested items are bank statements and new pay stubs, but they may also request copies of checks that you've written, explanations for transactions you've made, and any number of other documentation. Especially if you're self-employed, if you run a business or you're self-employed, the document requests can be really heavy. They may need to speak directly with your CPA or have documents prepared and sent directly from your bookkeeper or your tax preparer. In cases, sometimes they need to speak with your lawyer or receive documents from your lawyer. Commonly, this would be in connection with child support or alimony, or potentially other legal financial issues, potentially like a judgment or other types of court-ordered payments. All right, so make sure everything's squared away with your lender. Now get your earnest money turned in. Typically, the earnest money is turned into the title company for your transaction, but check with your realtor where to take your earnest money and double, triple check the amount of the earnest money is written on your contract. Make sure you get the amount right. Make it out to the right entity, often your title company, but not always, and get it turned in by the deadline. Usually that earnest money deadline is immediately. It's within the first day or two. So you can oftentimes take a check. Depending on how your contract's written, you may need to wire the funds to make sure that your earnest money gets there in time, and especially if you're out of town. If good funds were required versus a personal check, then you'll need to go to the bank and get a cashier's check if you don't want to do a wire. Again, discuss with your realtor and make sure you understand exactly who to make that payable to, how much, and by when. All right, so those are your step 1 and step 2, the lender and the earnest money. They happen very quickly. Step 3, call your home inspector. Maybe you have a short list of home inspectors you plan to call, or maybe you just have one. Either way, get on the phone with a home inspector immediately, or maybe they even have an online booking system you could book online. I definitely recommend having at least one introductory conversation with your home inspector before you hire them, so you're sure that you're comfortable with them and you know what to expect. Most home inspectors are going to review with you what your options are. So yes, there's always a general home inspection, but you may wish to add a radon test to that. Your home inspector will be able to tell you if they perform that and how much extra it costs. In most cases, that is recommended to have it tested for radon. If you would like to have the sewer scoped, you may be able to get that through your general home inspector, or you may need to hire a sewer line company or a plumber to come and check the sewer line. If you haven't heard me preach on the topic before, this is so important. I recommend it for almost all homes. There's absolutely no way to know the condition of a sewer line if you don't put a camera down it and have a look. It's under the ground, you can't see it otherwise. And if it has a problem, the cost to fix that sometimes can be very expensive. Especially with older homes, the sewer lines can be made out of materials such as clay. Roots can grow inside those clay pipes. As the roots grow, they can split the pipes. At a minimum, they can block the pipes. So if you have the sewer line scoped and it all looks great, that's just one less thing to worry about. If you have the sewer line scoped and you find that it's broken or blocked, that's a really important item to ask the seller to fix, or at least get a credit from the seller so that you can fix it. That damage, if you're lucky, might be just a few thousand, but oftentimes it's many thousands of dollars because you have to have an excavator come up and dig up the yard, fix the sewer line, then put the dirt back, and if there was landscaping, concrete, fence, or anything else on top, then they put that back on top too, which all costs money. So it can end up being a pretty big project, and you definitely don't want to discover that in your first month or year of home ownership. Sewer backups into the house are awful. It's expensive to fix not just the sewer line, but also the damage to the inside. So please just don't skip the sewer scope. Get your general home inspection lined up and your sewer scope. We also typically recommend the radon test as well. It's not as messy to fix high radon. It's a couple $1,000s. A radon mitigation company will come out and set up a radon mitigation system. So it is a simple fix in most cases, but still, why not have that tested now? So if there is high radon, potentially you can have the seller fix that, or at least give you a credit for it. And there are cases where the radon level is so very high that you may not even want to buy the home. So keep that in mind too. All right, so that's your home inspection prep. We'll come back around to the home inspection in a second. You can go ahead and call your insurance agent, or if you're planning to get a few quotes, call around or apply online and get some quotes for your home. The insurance agent will need to know things like the size and age of your home, of course, where it's located, the address. They may ask you detailed questions like what's the exterior made of, for example, brick or stucco or siding. And then they're going to give you a quote for the cost of your insurance. After you have your insurance quote, you need to get back in touch with your lender. Usually, you just give the lender your insurance agent's contact information, and they can speak directly to each other. In almost all cases of a mortgage loan, you are going to escrow for your insurance cost. What this means is every time that you make a mortgage payment, part of that payment is going to pay for your homeowner's insurance. Basically so that you don't have to remember to write multiple checks every month or remember to separately pay for your homeowner's insurance. It's all included in that monthly mortgage payment. In order for your lender to tell you exactly what your monthly mortgage payment will be, though, they need to speak with your insurance agent, and the two of them need to communicate so that your lender can have that escrow set up in time for closing. You can escrow the right amount for your insurance at the closing table on your closing day, and they can get you a specific payment amount per month. The other item that's part of your monthly payment is your property tax as well. So now that you've identified a home and you're under contract, you can check with the county assessor or check with your agent what the property tax amount is so your lender can factor that in, and then they'll be able to firm up for you exactly what your monthly payment will be on your mortgage. So you're checking with your insurance provider, make sure you can get insurance, and you'll have the opportunity to object to the sale if you can't get insurance. But typically, you're just making that call to find out what the cost is so that you can nail down your monthly payment. All right, so that's the start of your process. Your lender will speak with you about ordering the appraisal, but typically the appraisal is going to occur after the home inspection. So let's talk about your home inspection. You set that up, you get a day and time, make sure that your realtor knows that day and time and that they're available to be there with you. Typically in a perfect world, your realtor will be there, the home inspector will be there, and you will be there. If you can't be there because you're at work or you're out of state, it's awesome to send a representative on your behalf, whether that's a family member or a friend, someone who knows you well. It's great to have another person there to be able to share the information with you. As a realtor, I do often attend home inspections where the buyer's not there, But you are missing something if you're not there to ask your questions to the home inspector and let them really explain verbally in detail while pointing out the parts of the home that matter, how to take care of your furnace, little signs and symptoms that they're seeing of something that's not necessarily a problem right now today, but you want to keep your eye on it over time. It will really help you remember things about your house to take care of and to check on if you can be present for your home inspection. You will learn so much. So if you can't be there, try to send a representative. If you can't find someone to go with you, at least have your realtor call you in. So on a Zoom call, a Skype call, WhatsApp call, whatever's popular today, FaceTime. Get on a video call at least during part of the home inspection to have a look around and point out those items that the home inspector is seeing. The home inspector will provide you with a very thorough report with lots of photos, in some cases even little video snippets and some explanations. But written explanations only go so far. There's really no substitute for laying eyes on the issue so that you can determine for yourself if this is a big thing for you or really just a very small thing, just some information that the inspector gives you. So the inspector will give you information both good and bad. Hopefully it's all good. It almost never is. No home is perfect. So usually the best we can hope for is mostly good information, that the home is well maintained, mostly everything's working well, and almost always the home inspector is going to point out a few things that aren't quite perfect. Maybe they weren't built quite right in the first place, or the codes have changed so they're a little outdated and you may want to update them in the future. Items that are getting a little older that you need to keep an eye on and how to maintain those. For example, a water heater. Water heater certainly doesn't last forever. If it's showing signs of leaking now, we would consider that broken, and we would definitely want to ask for the seller to fix it for you. But in many cases, the water heater is just getting old. It's not that it's not working. It is. It is working. But given the age, the home inspector may advise you to start saving up for a new water heater because it's inevitable. It won't last forever, and you want to make sure to be able to replace that when the time comes. Another item or topic would be the home warranty. If there's a lot of older parts to the house, maybe you want to ask the seller to buy you a home warranty to cover you in the first year of your ownership in case any of those items stop working. All right, so the home inspector is going to go on the roof. He'll look for hail and wind damage and any other commentary he might have on the roof, such as how it's sealed wherever there's penetrations in the roof. They'll peek in the fireplace and they'll let you know if they see anything there, although they often do recommend to have a separate fireplace inspection if there's a chimney and a fireplace. They will have a look at the furnace. In many cases, they give it a thorough look and they just check it off and tell you it's working fine. But even furnaces that are working well need to be cleaned and serviced on a regular basis. So you will usually hear from your home inspector that the furnace should be cleaned and serviced. They almost always say that because they'd like to have a furnace professional, an HVAC professional, come and certify that it's in safe working order for you. They kind of just don't want to overstep their bounds. Most home inspectors will feel comfortable giving you a general, it looks good or it doesn't look good. So it's really common to hear that an HVAC professional should come out and check on the furnace or the boiler or whatever system the home may have for heating, because that's just so important for you to be able to live in the home. If the temperatures outside allow, they'll check the air conditioning. If you buy a home in the winter, you may not be able to check the air conditioner because you can't run it when it's very cold out. So keep that in mind. You may want to get some assurances from the seller that the AC is working if you happen to buy in the winter. Also in the wintertime, you can't run the sprinkler systems, although it is kind of rare for home inspectors to actually test sprinkler systems. Usually you would need to do that on your own or hire a third party to do that. But just bear in mind in the winter, it won't be possible. Here in Colorado, sprinkler systems stop working all the time because of our temperature fluctuations and how often it freezes in the ground. We find a lot of sprinkler systems with issues. So any proof that we can get of the sprinkler system being in a good working order would be great. Of course, in the summer, we can set up with the seller for you to test the system. Going through the house again, the inspector is going to check the electrical system. They'll have a look at the electrical panel and let you know any findings there. They'll check all the outlets to see if they're in safe working order. They should check all the switches and the lights in the home. They should also check all the plumbing, which means running the bathtubs, flushing the toilets, running the sinks, looking for leaks. They're very detail oriented. Finding someone who's highly recommended is really important because the value of the home is just so high and there's so many parts that make up a house. Finding everything that's wrong at this time is really your chance to either exit the contract without any penalty to yourself, or at least get the seller to make some repairs for you before it becomes yours. Once you buy, any problem in the house becomes your problem. That's what we call the joys of home ownership, which I guarantee you will experience, because again, no home is perfect, but you want to get the best sense that you can of what's right and wrong in the house, what's working, what's aging, and what may be broken. All right, so please try to be present, at least have someone present on your behalf with the home inspector when they're there, and call around and get a sense of different home inspectors, prices and processes and reviews, and see who you'd like to work with. That's something you can go ahead and do right now, even when you're only thinking about buying a house and aren't involved in the process yet. But that's one of the most important and involved parts of your contract process, is the home inspection, as I imagine that you already know. After your home inspection is complete, if your contract had an inspection objection deadline, then you can work with your realtor to draw up an inspection objection. Some items that potentially could be on there, for example, is the radon in the house was found to be high, so the seller would install a radon mitigation system before closing. You may ask them to clean and service the furnace. Of course, if there's any water leaks or anything in the home that's broken, you may want to ask the seller to fix that, unless you have the funds to fix it yourself, and perhaps you were already planning to fix it, or you'd just like to change it entirely. So I see that occasionally, where the buyer already was planning to change something inside the home. So the fact that it doesn't work right now or is broken actually doesn't matter, because they were already planning to replace it. So it's different for everyone. But based on your budget, your abilities, your comfort level, you can object to as much or as little as you want. When it's a really competitive market and there's too many buyers for the houses, just be aware that sellers oftentimes don't agree to do a lot. They may agree to fix a couple things for you, but you might not get all your requests met. That doesn't mean you can't make them. So go ahead and make whatever requests feel important for you. In a down market where there's more houses than buyers, you're much more likely to get sellers who are really cooperative in helping you and doing a lot of repairs for you, or at least credits, meaning money at closing that then you can use to do those repairs later. If you're taking credits in lieu of repairs, just be well prepared. Make sure that you're getting an amount that is really representative of what it would actually cost. So that might mean getting some bids for that repair before you make an agreement with the seller. So after you have compiled your objections into an inspection objection, your realtor will help work with you on that. Make sure it's in writing. Your realtor will deliver it to the seller's agent on or before your inspection objection deadline, and then the seller has a period of time to respond to you. The inspection resolution deadline is the deadline by which you and the seller together have to make an agreement how these items will be handled. To just give an example, the seller may write back saying, half of these items I'll do for you and the other half I won't. If that's enough for you to still want to buy this house, they put that resolution in writing, you sign it, and you're all done. Your inspection process is complete. If the seller doesn't agree to fix anything for you, or the resolution that they propose is not enough for you to still want to buy the house, you can cancel and have your earnest money back. I hope that doesn't happen to you, but it does happen. The inspection is definitely the most common time for home sale agreements to fall apart, meaning that the buyer chooses not to buy and gets the earnest money back. All right, so following your home inspection, then the appraiser needs to come to the house if you're getting a mortgage. What does the appraiser do, and what does that look like, and do you need to be there? You don't need to be there. Oftentimes it's the seller's agent who lets the appraiser in. The appraiser is a third party not involved in the sale other than just to strictly do this job. So in fact, your lender typically doesn't even talk to the appraiser. Your lender will order the appraisal with your permission, but they do it through a third party system. So basically the lender is going to get your approval to order the appraisal. Then they'll submit it to appraisal management system. That will put out a notice to appraisers, and some appraiser is going to pick up that appraisal order and then schedule that to go do it. So you don't actually talk to the appraiser. Your agent is very unlikely to talk to the appraiser. That appraiser just needs to go in the home, take some measurements, check out the condition of the home, and have a look at it so that they can make a comparison between your house and other homes that have sold. What the appraiser is looking for primarily is value. They are there to check on behalf of your lender whether the house is worth what you've agreed to pay for it. So you have a purchase price line on your contract. Now the appraiser comes in to check if that purchase price is in line with market values according to their metrics. The appraiser is working on behalf of the company giving you the loan, even though you are paying for that appraisal. If the appraiser finds the value of the home to be less than the purchase price, that could be your chance to make an appraisal objection. In some contracts, you're actually promising to pay in excess of the appraised value if that's necessary in your market. So if that's the case, take that into consideration first. Otherwise, if the appraised value is low, you would file an appraisal objection and try to work that out with the seller. The other item of business for an appraiser is to check the physical condition of the property. The appraiser is essentially checking if the home is habitable. The definition of habitable is a bit different between a conventional loan and your FHA VA loans. The FHA and VA loans have a lower down payment, so the lenders and the federal government want to make sure that this asset meets their criteria, and those criteria are a little bit higher than they are for a conventional loan. So there are certain items that FHA and VA appraisers will point out that a conventional appraiser wouldn't. Some of those could include peeling paint, missing flooring, and cracked windows. So any of those items in the property could be what we call an appraisal condition, meaning a physical condition of the property that has to be repaired prior to closing in order for you to get the loan. So if your appraisal comes back with an appraisal condition on it, referring to the property condition, that's another reason that you would want or need to file an appraisal objection. It's not negotiable. Once an appraisal condition comes in, somebody has to fix it in order for you to get that loan. You can't talk the lender out of it. So the discussion then is just who's going to fix it, or do you have to buy a different house? I really hope you don't have to buy a different house and someone will agree to fix it. So in some cases, the seller permits the buyer to go and do those repairs. Most times you don't want to invest money and time in a property that you don't own yet. But if that's what it takes for you to be able to close and get your loan, that can be considered. In most cases, the seller is going to agree to do the replacements or the repairs necessary. For example, replace a pane of broken glass. They would just need to have that done before closing so that you can get your loan. So you have those two reasons that you might file an appraisal objection, which is value or condition. If you need to put together an appraisal objection, as always, make sure it's in writing and submit it to the seller on or before your appraisal objection deadline. Then for the resolution, the seller will write back and either tell you, yes, I'll change the purchase price to match your appraised value, or yes, I'll do the repairs needed, or they may not. They may not feel able or interested to resolve your objection. And if that's the case, you may not reach a resolution. You may have to cancel the contract, get your earnest money back, and find another house. Again, I really hope that doesn't happen for you and you would be able to negotiate an arrangement with the seller that works for everyone if that came to pass. Appraisal objections are not extremely common, but certainly we do see them. And, any good agent will know how to walk you through that process and help to resolve that between the buyer and the seller. Now we have your loan objection deadline. If your contract has a loan objection deadline, make really sure to be in close contact with your lender through that deadline. If they need anything else from you, make sure to deliver that and just double, triple check with them that your loan is good to go before that deadline passes. If it seems like for any reason your loan's not going to fund, you need to make sure to make your loan termination deadline, which is to say you're putting together a termination notice to the seller saying, I'm sorry, but I can't close on the house. My loan's not going to work out. As long as you do that during your loan termination deadline in writing, then you can have your earnest money back at least. It's still a sad way to see a transaction end, but at least you don't lose your earnest money. If you pass by your loan termination deadline and later in the process you find out that your loan is not going to be able to close and you won't be able to afford to buy the house, that's a much worse situation because you lose your earnest money. The seller would get that as their consolation for keeping the house off the market for you. So pay close attention to your loan objection deadline, or your loan termination deadline, and utilize it if it's necessary, and I hope it won't be. If you're buying in an HOA, there'll be a deadline for the seller to give you the HOA documents. Please read those. They can be long and boring, but they're very important. If you purchase that house, the rules of the HOA you'll have to live by. So make sure that the pet rules are fine for you if that applies to you. Make sure that the renting rules are fine for you if that applies to you. Make sure you understand what parts of your property the HOA will maintain and what are yours to maintain. And that crosses over with your insurance as well. With some HOAs, they pay for the building insurance for the house you live in. You just insure your contents. In other HOA communities, they don't pay for any insurance for you. You need to have an insurance policy that covers the house inside and out. So that's different from place to place, and make sure you understand that and that your insurance agent understands that and accounts for it. There's so many different things that can be in HOA documents. They can cover the trash service, for example. Is that included for you? How about snow removal? Is the snow removal just on the streets, or is it on the sidewalks? Is it on your driveway? These documents should cover that. You also should be able to read the HOA minutes, meeting minutes, meaning what are the people in the community currently discussing? What issues have they been having? What are they trying to work through right now? It can really give you some good insight into the community, what it's like to live there, and what the concerns of the people living there are. So that's very important. If you read those HOA documents and they're not acceptable for you, you can file an objection on or before your association documents objection deadline. Then if the seller can resolve it, perhaps they will. Typically, the HOAs take it or leave it. The seller typically doesn't have the power to change HOA documents. So if the rules, for example, prohibit dogs that are 50 pounds and your dog's 50 pounds, then make sure to terminate sooner than later. There's no reason to put that off if the property's not going to work for you. All right, so that covers your HOA. We talked in the last episode about due diligence documents. That's your etc. category. Everything else, perhaps some receipts for repairs that were done, some plans for an addition or a remodel that was done, any type of test results and information that the seller has about the property already. You want to breeze through that stuff, have a look, make sure that nothing stands out as looking wrong for you. Usually it's just procedural. You're just having a look. You just want to retain that for your ownership so you have a better understanding and record of the property. But if there's anything fishy in there that makes you not want to buy the house, again, your contract should have due diligence documents objection deadline that you can use, and perhaps the seller could resolve it on the due diligence resolution deadline with you. You'll also receive your title material. This comes from the title company. Discussing title, what is it? What is title insurance? What's it for? How do you use it? It honestly can be a pretty long discussion. It's very tied to your legal ownership of the property. I don't want to belabor this episode about being under contract, diving into the nitty-gritty of title insurance right now, but in the big picture, title insurance exists to ensure that you really own the house after you buy it. You're going to pay a lot of money to own property. You want to make sure that no one else has any claims against that property, only you. So the title insurance will also make sure that you won't be subject to the seller's debts or the debts of anyone else who's ever owned the property. So once you put your mortgage on the house, you of course own that debt and you have to pay it back. But if the seller hired a contractor to do work on the property before your ownership, and after you buy, that contractor comes to you asking for the money, you don't have to pay them. That's the seller's responsibility, and so the title insurance will back you up and will take that over to get that paid and get the seller to pay it. That's just one of many, many examples of how the title insurance can come into play. They can also potentially insure the boundaries of the property against encroachments, say from your neighbor building a fence across your property line. The title material on a very basic level, as you read it through, will show you your property boundaries, the plat map for your area, the covenants for your neighborhood as they're recorded. It'll show you who's owned the house in the past. They call that the chain of title, who has previously owned the property. It will show you, gosh, just so many things. It's packed with information. The title commitment is a fairly lengthy document, typically, if you dig into all the recorded material that's linked there. Have a look. Again, this is the property that you're buying. It's a lot of money. It's a big investment. You're going to be paying this off for a long time in most cases. So make sure that it's really what you want to buy. That said, typically the title commitment and the title material doesn't change anything for people. It's pretty rare to find a real title problem that will keep you from buying the house. So read it. There's no reason to worry about this part of the process, but please have a good look at it. If there's something you don't understand, ask your realtor, ask the title company, and or have your lawyer review the title material for you and with you. All right, so that is your buying process. That's what it looks like. Some contracts have some special clauses of other things. You may choose to order a survey, for example. Like we said in the prior video, it's not extremely common to have a survey. And you may have custom deadlines for your contract, but these are the main things that happen in your typical home sale process. So once you've been through each of these steps that I just described, the last thing to do is to wait for closing. And at that time, you just pack, you plan your move, you plan how you're going to change your address everywhere, and you just get ready for that big closing day and moving day. Stay in close contact with your lender. Make sure, again, that anything they need to get your loan across the finish line is done and done in time. Make sure you understand exactly how many dollars to bring to the closing, and you know how you're going to get them there. Typically, it's a wire transfer. You want to talk directly to your closing company for your wire instructions. Be careful, there's a lot of fraud around wire instructions, so make rock solid sure that you have those direct from your closing company, meaning not via an email but by a phone call, and that you get your money to closing on time. In some cases, you might bring a cashier's check or bank check instead of wiring funds. You definitely cannot bring a stack of cash, and you can't write a personal check. It has to be what we call good funds. So typically a wire transfer for closing. They will need to see identification at the closing table. Driver's license would be a typical example. Sometimes they're requiring two forms of identification. So before closing day, make contact with your closing company and check what they need to see from you for ID. Typically a photo ID, something current, not expired, of course. Make sure if they need two forms of ID that you're prepared for that and that you have forms of ID that match their requirements. As closing day approaches, the seller is going to do any repairs that they may have promised to do for you, and then you're going to plan your walkthrough. Oftentimes that final walkthrough is right before closing, or maybe it's the day before closing, but it should be very close to the closing time. You're going to just do exactly that. You're going to walk through. It usually doesn't take very long. You go in the house and make sure it's in the condition that you expect it, in the condition that was agreed in the contract. Some contracts say the home is sold strictly as is. There was no changes made by the seller. They never promised to fix anything for you. They never promised to clean anything. It's exactly as you saw it on your showing, minus their stuff. So the seller always needs to move out their stuff unless you guys agreed otherwise. Move out their bed and their couch and everything. That should be gone. And in your final walkthrough, you're just going to make sure everything's in the same condition that it was. And if the seller did agree to make changes or repairs for you, that those things have been done. For example, if they agreed to clean something, check and make sure it's clean. If they agree to replace something, check and make sure it's replaced and working. Any work that the seller agrees to do for you, typically you're going to be requesting receipts. So you should be able to see those receipts around that time of your walkthrough too, so that you can verify that things were done right before closing. It is a big process. It's a long process, but at this point you are almost there. So close you can taste it. So get your IDs together, get your money together, and show up to your closing company at the right time. Your realtor should be able to help you know exactly where to go and when. In Colorado currently, an hour is typically plenty of time for closing. It's typically just during business hours on weekdays. So if you work a regular full-time job, make sure that you have the time off that you need to attend your closing. You'll sign a lot of documents, especially if you're getting a mortgage. You have double documents. So we have what we call the real estate documents or the sale documents that firm up the fact that you're buying the property from the seller. Then you have your lender's documents that firm up the fact that you're receiving a loan from the lender and you promise to pay it back. Typically, the lender's documents are the bigger stack. That debt is a big deal, and they want to make sure that you are tied to it and that you do promise to pay back your mortgage over time. If you happen to be buying with cash, usually the closing is a pretty quick, smooth process. It could take as little as about 15 minutes to sign a short stack of real estate closing documents, and you're out of there. The title company will provide your title insurance commitment effective as of the time and date of closing. You should be picking up keys and garage door openers at the closing table. And if you have the time, head straight over to your new home and enjoy it. Start putting your personal touch on there. Start moving your boxes and start getting settled in your new home. So that is the purchase process overview. What happens when you're under contract. And your under contract process goes all the way from when your offer is accepted to your day of closing, when you become the new owner of your new home. So again, if you are in this process, congratulations. It's huge. It's exciting. I hope that these videos have been really helpful to help you prepare for what to expect and what happens step by step. Closing is definitely the most exciting part. It's when this property becomes yours. You can now do with it exactly as you like, paint it, change it, plant a garden, whatever is in your dreams for yourself and your home. It's time to get started. So again, congratulations, thanks for watching, and hope to see you soon.